All right, it's time again for the Press Box Podcast. Today it'll be episode number 86, and we have another special guest with us today. Anthony Famiglietti will join us. He is a former two-time Olympian, 04 and 08, in the Steeplechase and various other track events as well. Really interesting guy. We get into a lot of different stuff that he's done, some art, obviously Olympics, some coaching, some branding, some things like that. I really think you'll enjoy this interview about not only Olympics, but just life in general. It's really something for you guys. So before we get into that, as always, let's talk about our Twitter account at PressBoxPod. Follow us on there if you haven't already. Stay up to date with the latest episodes. We'll tweet out the links. Follow us on iTunes as well. Subscribe, rate, and review, all that good stuff to keep up to date with all our episodes as we head into the fall football season coming up. And all the things that are coming there. We have a lot of stuff coming on the Press Box Podcast. But without further ado, let's get into our interview with Anthony right now for episode number 86.
Okay, welcome back to the Press Box Podcast. This is episode number 86. And in keeping with our Olympic theme, now that the Olympics have started in Tokyo, we are joined today by a special guest. He is a two-time Olympian, having competed in the 2004 Athens Games and the 2008 Beijing Games. He has competed in cross-country, steeplechase, 5,000 meters. He was a member of the University of Tennessee track team after being a member of the Appalachian State University track team. He is a contemporary artist. He's an abstract painter and sculptor. In addition to being a two-time Olympian, he was a three-time U.S. World Team member and a six-time United States champion, a true Renaissance man, Anthony Famiglietti. Anthony, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the wonderful intro.
well, you deserve it. You have achieved so much in your short life. I say short life because you're still a very young man. So I want to start. I want to start first by just asking you. I'm not sure if you watch the Olympics now that you're not competing in them anymore, but if you do, what are your initial thoughts of the Tokyo Games so far in the first 4 or 5 days?
Obviously, initially the coverage is just a little different.
Yeah.
So getting access to see when things are on is getting a little bit more confusing.
Right.
If you don't have, if you're sort of unplugged and using an Apple TV or different things like that, used to be you just switch on the TV and NBC was on there, one of the primary channels. And so I think just initially the coverage and the accessibility to the general public, a lot of people say, well, that was on. I didn't realize that was on.
Yeah.
And I think prioritizing in terms of what had happened with COVID and TV time, I think a lot of people were inside so much. Now they're moving back outside. So you're not seeing as much hype and energy around the opening as you normally would with that sort of delay there. Adding skateboarding in was interesting because I was a big skateboarding fan and that was my first sport in my youth. But the way that it was sort of set up and being the first event, I think most people just missed that too. It just sort of came really quickly out of the blue. I think a lot of people who have seen it, you're seeing a lot of stuff through social media now and getting this sort of instantaneous updates. And so It's hard to want to sit through and watch the entire thing when you can just find out the result really quickly.
Yeah.
So I think it in that sense, I feel bad for the athletes because you used to have more of a build up and anticipation of what was going to happen. And so it helped play out the stories of the athletes a little bit more because you mostly generally just hear about the medalists, and the top contenders, but there's so many interesting stories that I wish there was this huge, long build up into helping you identify these athletes so you can become a fan of them because most of them are just sort of off training places you've never heard of intensely for years. That's why they're not out in the public eye as much.
That's really an excellent point. I think you hit on it. I'm guilty of this too. I think when we think of the Olympics, we tend to think of the medal winners because that's usually what we see. But you're right. I mean, there's so many other athletes that go there and they may never even see the finals or they may not qualify for an event there or whatever. but yet they're Olympians, and the stories of what it took for them to get there are very real. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, Joseph, go ahead. What were we going to say?
One more point on the current Olympics is obviously the fans not being allowed to be in attendance there. As an athlete yourself and a former Olympian, is that something that you think would have affected you in one way or another? Or when you're competing, is it just all focused? You don't really care who is not in attendance?
I mean, in my personal case, I fell in the '04 Olympics. I was distracted by the crowd because it was such a big crowd and such a high pressure day. So in some senses, different events, it might lend to a more comfortable performance. And, others, if you're someone who feeds off the crowd, like Usain Bolt, you don't have that. Who are you going to pose in front of? The camera? What I mean?
Right.
He gets sort of amped up off of the crowd. The other point that I was going to make too was
sure.
Everyone's looking at the medal count like right away. We haven't had a count like this since this, and so the emphasis has always been, like you said, on the medals and not like this individual sort of story. So when I fell in the '04 Athens Olympics, it was in the preliminary race and I was in amazing shape. And one of the coaches said, just don't take the lead in the prelim. Please save your energy for the final. So I was sort of convinced to do that, even though it's not my style. I like to front run and see the hurdles. So I made a mistake with the pressure and the change in my normal plan. But I was walking around the Acropolis, the Parthenon, there in Athens, Greece, which is, the quintessential Olympic spot, like the center of the universe for this. And I had a mohawk and, camouflage shirt, my credential, and was sitting there. And a gentleman came up and grabbed both hands, said, you get up. And I thought I was in a restricted area, but he was just telling me like he had seen me on TV fall in the race, get back up. And the Greek TV sort of zoomed in on that and played out that story. Whereas that second that happened, the U.S. cameras just turned away. Like, oh, no medal here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was the interesting, dichotomy of what the Olympics means in the place it was born and, generated out of, and then what it became for the rest of the world.
That's a great point. Yeah, I'd never quite thought of it that way, but that's an excellent point. Let me ask you a little bit about running. I mean, obviously you love running. How did you really get into it? I mean, I guess every young person at some point in their life runs, right? I mean, that's what young people do. They run when they're 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. But how did you get into it from a competitive standpoint? And how did you choose the events you did? In other words, the steeplechase and those. How did you kind of evolve into that?
I was more of an artistic kid. So in my bio, it says, an artist. And my great grandfather was an artist and taught sculpture in Greenwich Village, New York. So, I didn't have an athletics background in my family. So it's always a gym teacher that usually identifies some sort of ability. And in my case, it was a gym teacher who encouraged me to run. I went out for the team and I was okay at first. I wasn't a superstar or anything like that. But I didn't like to lose. I have a very, I don't want to say I'm perfectionist attitude, but very driven. And once I start something, whatever it is, if you can get me interested in it, I'll take it very, very, very far. Mm-hmm. And so he pointed me towards that direction as about a 7th or 8th grader. And then when I got to the high school, his protege, a guy named Frank Oliva, was the cross country course coach. I tried out for his 3-mile course the first day of practice, and I quit the first day because it was too hard and I was second to last on the team. So sort of this shell shock of the work that was going to have to take place. And I can see that it was going to be 3 years of work to catch those seniors. And I was so far behind, I just threw in the towel. But once I committed to it, the next year I was almost state champion. I destroyed the school record. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a sport where you kind of get dragged into it reluctantly. And then when you discover what it's about, whether you have talent or not, or work ethic, you can take it really far. And that's why I love running in the Olympics. I was joking to some athletes I coach where, some countries don't have swimming pools, or we're talking about dressage with the horses, like how expensive that is. But in distance running, everyone runs, and the poorest countries seem to be the best. So it's this beautiful thing to take place in the Olympics, not just like these sort of recreational sports.
Yeah.
It's very fundamental. Yeah.
Interesting.
We'll talk a little bit about, I know you just talked about how you kind of got into track and things like that. Talk about, your college experience. I think starting at Appalachian State and then going to Tennessee and kind of taking it to the next level and being really competitive with your track. Talk about that experience.
Yeah, I wasn't I don't think I was good enough to get recruited by Tennessee. I had won the state meet, but it wasn't, I wasn't running phenomenal times till my senior year in June at the state meet, which all the scholarships are gone by then.
Right.
So I got a double thumbs up from the coach at Appalachian State in North Carolina to come down, and he would find some money to give me a chance to be out of state and move to the South and try to run some beautiful locations. So I did. And pretty quickly, the same thing happened. I wasn't the best on the team, but I was just so driven. Within 2 years, I was multiple conference champion. And at that point, I thought, well, maybe I am good enough to transfer to a school like Tennessee, which I had raced Sea Ray relays, which is an early track meet a couple of years. And I really enjoyed my time in Knoxville. And I think I had my steeplechase PR there. And so as I was looking around, it turns out the coach there had great experience in steeplechase. Doug Brown, who used to coach at University of Tennessee, was the Olympic team captain, and he was a steeplechaser and had the school record. So there's a great history there. It made sense for me to come to Knoxville and explore that. I was sort of forbidden to run the steeplechase all those years. And when I finally got the chance to, I would just give everything I had. So the coach at UT saw me race the steeplechase. That's one thing to hear someone's personal best times, but to see me race really kind of was a work of art and how I approached it, because I had to work so much harder than these other super talented athletes that didn't need a 2-year build up to get to that point. Mm-hmm. So once my fitness level reached my, level of intensity in terms of working out and that grit, it was just magic happened where the guys who were talented, I finally caught up to them, but they hadn't had to do that level of work ethic to get to that point. Right. And when it got difficult for them, I was used to nothing but difficult because it took so long. Right. So when I finally got that opportunity at Tennessee, I literally ran with it to heights I didn't expect.
Yeah. What about, were you able to enjoy any of the other campus life characteristics at Tennessee? Did you attend any football games, basketball games? I mean, what was your life like outside of when you were on the track?
So I came in 98, which was right. Like, I wasn't a college football fan. And then the very first game I went to in Neyland Stadium was Tennessee versus Florida, where they missed the field goal and right. Everyone rushed the field. That was the first real college football game that I've been to, first Tennessee game. And I was getting pushed from the back. I said, what are we doing? We're tearing down the goalpost. I had no idea what that meant. Right. And then ripping up the field. And I had no choice because there, thousands of people pushing you from the back. You're a skinny distance runner. You're like, okay, I'll go right. Flow here. Right. That was a life-changing experience. I was a huge football fan after that, college football, and a huge UT sports fan. So, what better way?
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. We go ahead, Joseph.
No, go ahead. I have a question for you. Just kind of maybe to explain to some more of our casual track and field listeners or sports listeners, what exactly is the steeplechase? Now, we know what it is. Now, a lot of maybe Olympic fans, like they see Usain Bolt, they see the sprints, maybe the long jumps, but the steeplechase maybe doesn't get as much publicity as like the 100-meter dash. So you can just kind of, best you can, explain what the steeplechase is and maybe some strategy involved in running it.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah. So, it's what the horses do. Jump over. That's the best way to explain it. When the old-timey horses used to race, they jump over the hedges and the big, striped wooden blocks. So there was a comedian on Twitter who had seen the steeplechase come up on TV, and she said, "What the blank is this?" She couldn't believe the striped. They're not, hurdles. They're barriers. They don't move. They're like 6-7 feet wide, and they weigh 300-400 pounds. They're super heavy, so they don't move when multiple people are stepping and jumping over them. So you've got 4 of those hurdles each lap, and then one hurdle that's a water pit behind it. It's 12 feet long and 3 feet deep. So you have to jump over this water pit. And I say it's the only race where people actually root for you to fall. They want to see it. And it's like the most exciting sort of NASCAR-esque car crash can happen at any moment sort of event. And pretty much every Olympics, you'll see I was one that went down. Doesn't matter how good you are at it, whether you're, an expert or not, it just could sting you at any moment. So the uncertainty of that event, it's 3K. So it's 2 miles. So it's distance hurtling. I'll never forget talking to University of Tennessee teammate Justin Gatlin at the 2004 Olympics. And I had just fallen. And I was like, it's 7.5 laps, Justin. And I have, about 35, 37 barriers that I have to jump the entire time. So there's so much that could go wrong. And, it's just sort of bemoaning what had happened to me. And he goes, I have 9.8 seconds.
That's
I can't
right.
make any mistakes. He's like, you got it easy. You can get back up. You know what I mean? And so he put it in perspective for me, where I realized like, yeah, okay. So there's different aspects to other things that are challenging. And the steeplechase sort of combines all those, like the rigor of the marathon, endurance of the 10K,
Right.
the speed endurance of the 5K, the flat out speed of the mile. It's got everything in there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about some of the other events that you competed in. I know you've done 5,000 meters. Is that right?
Yeah. So I probably would have been a better 5K runner and 10K runner.
Okay.
And I was asked to the first years at App State, and I did well in the 5K. When I came to Tennessee, they were going to give me like free reign to run steeplechase. So that's all I wanted to do, because I don't want to do it like 2 or 3 times. It was off limits.
Right.
If you're a good 5K runner, they don't want you to get hurt. And so, the Kenyans, their best runner, that's their best event. So It's sort of the opposite in America. So it's taken us a while to catch up to that. So I denied doing the 5K and 10K until finally post-collegiately, my coach, George Watts, Todd Williams was a huge Olympic distance runner at Tennessee. And he was this great sort of figure for me to look up to and try to emulate. That's one thing Tennessee always had, was this great athletic history where you can point to someone to latch onto the way to do it. And as an Olympian in town, I was like, okay, Todd's doing this thing. It is a reality. And, so the environment lends to that. And I would just sort of try to reach for his times. So my coach had said, hey, Todd Williams, his PR is this for 10K. And he said, you haven't done it because you're a coward. You're afraid of it's too many laps for you. So it was the exact right thing for him to say to me. So that's all I wanted to do is the 10K.
Right.
And I said, hey, what's Todd's record? I missed his record by about his personal record by about 3 seconds or something like that.
Wow.
Just in my opener for 10K as a pro, it would have been the fastest debut ever. But a guy named Alan Webb was in there with me. He had run a 3:53 mile in high school, so he was used to setting records. I was the guy that was a 4:24 miler. I was, more 30 seconds behind him as a high school miler. But here I was neck and neck with him, like 1 or 2 seconds in this major elite race. So that was a big eye opener for me, that I had all this sort of limitless athletic potential that I didn't even know was in there.
Right.
And I was just sort of trying to survive through college to get this great degree in education at a university like UT, but not lose my scholarship. So I can
right.
keep on it. So the way things have changed with sport and NCAA now, with the rules changing, I've been sort of going over, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's going to help athletes afford more and be able to, dedicate more to their studies in athletics without having to work, or is it going to work against them in the end? Who knows?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. We really don't know the answer to that question. Let's move on past the Olympics now. I mean, obviously you competed in 2. You can talk a little bit about whether you tried for the London Games in 2012 or not. But obviously you've given us a good indication that you're not the kind of guy that when you're done competing, you're going to sit behind a desk. You take on many challenges. So talk to us about that transition from Olympic athlete to maybe just competitive runner, and then some of the things you've been doing since then with running. So
the first thing I did sort of as I transitioned racing a lot less elite races was create a brand. I still did it while I was competing as an elite athlete. So I created an apparel brand called Reckless Running. Folks can see it at recklessrunning.com.
Right.
And there was a very specific point, because in the 2004 Olympics, I passed around a petition for the athletes to be able to wear any logo they want on their uniforms. At the Olympics, you can only wear Nike branded stuff. They have a special agreement with the Olympic Committee.
Interesting.
So you can't even promote your own, sponsor there.
Right.
What you could do is wear your racing spikes, and so people could see that you had Adidas or other branded shoes on. Now, the problem is that Nike created a super shoe where athletes, if you're not wearing that, you're at a disadvantage. So Nike actually had to make a blank version of that shoe for their competitor athletes to wear for the fair advantage. So some athletes will be racing in a Nike shoe, even though they're not sponsored by Nike at the Olympics. So there's all these restrictions on like microscopic logo size, how many logos you could have, whether you can have any at all. Only a manufacturer's brand like Asics, Adidas, Brooks, Puma,
right.
Nike. And so it limited you down to about 8 to 12 sponsors. So there's only going to be so much negotiation, and leverage, because, if there's collusion between Nike and Adidas and they both say, well, we'll keep our offer low as long as you keep your offer low, then the athletes were always getting paid minimal. So coming out of amateurism didn't actually work for the best. And sort of why I mentioned what's popping up in the NCAA.
Right.
So my petition was for, NASCAR style, being here in Mooresville, Race City, USA right now, North Carolina, where you see NASCAR racers have McDonald's, cell phone companies, multiple sponsors for the uniform, which pays for training, heightens the ability of the athlete to have the freedom to not have the stress and do other things. We didn't have that. And so I was like, you know what, if I can't get this, I got the petition through. I had thousands of signatures from athletes from every country. So they said, all right, you got to take it to the IAAF because they're in charge of international track and field. And they're based in Monaco. They don't really have their taxes looked into because they're in this sort of,
right.
In this situation. And so I give them the petition, they just don't look at it.
Right.
We've got thousands of, so it's done that way so that they sort of control the sponsorship rights and make the lion's share of the wealth.
Sure.
So I created a brand. I said, you know what, I'll become a manufacturer. And so that's what I did. And it's been 11 years. I started it in a basement in Knoxville in around 2009. And with a $500 screen printing machine that we had in there, designed everything, hand cut and sew everything. And now people custom order custom fitting racing singlets to run marathon stuff from us. So people initially were like, how are you going to compete with $1 billion brand?
Right.
And everyone expects this instantaneous millionaire type way of doing things, where it's mass consumption, send everything to get made in China, bring it back here. And we're starting to see what's happening in terms of, friction in the world economics because of that method going on for so long. So we don't want to be this mass produced brand. So we made bespoke, made to order stuff in Knoxville, and now we do it in North Carolina.
Awesome.
So it was a way to open the door where I don't compete with a $1 billion company. I compete with the salary that they would pay me, and then have immense freedom to do whatever I want to do at any given moment. I'm not under contract.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so after that, we transitioned into coaching, and I've been coaching for about 8 years through, the brand Reckless Running, and 18 state titles, individual titles, I think, in those 8 years already. So it's been awesome. Yeah,
that is awesome. Joseph?
Too about some of the art things you're doing. I know you said you were interested in that growing up, and our producer Nathan, gave us some info on installation you have coming up. Talk about that a little bit, and what first attracted you to art, and what you're doing with it currently.
I first realized I was pretty adept at art in like 6th grade, and we had to make a sculpture, and I sort of knocked it out of the park really quickly without even just, it was just in my nature. So I got highlighted by the teacher and put in the middle school hallway when you walk into the school. So I realized that this is something I was good at. I started painting. My last solo show was in 2003 in Knoxville, Tennessee, on Gay Street in a corner, huge corner building. It was shot by the local news, and the pieces were awesome, but they were pretty weird for Knoxville for 2003. Now if you looked at the stuff, it'd be really up to date.
Right.
But I left a lot of those paintings behind when I moved to New York City after that. So there's still several of my paintings floating around. You can see one at Eddie Raymond's health shop, I think, where his Alter G treadmill is. But there's huge canvases that I did. Some of them were 12 feet by 4 feet long. I had to hoist them off the side of the building into the gallery space. I was in a huge penthouse on Gay Street in Knoxville that had 2 levels and a rooftop deck access. So I had to lower the paintings out of there. But it was an amazing feeling. I was injured and couldn't race at the time. So rather than be stir crazy, I studied art and psychology at UT. I decided to apply that and put together this show, and it was amazing. But then I became an Olympian and made the intro. So I left sort of painting behind. It's been about 18 years since I've shown anything. And so after COVID and having people pass away in my family, and, just all kinds of strange things happened, I decided to pick up the paintbrush again. I was inspired to do it. And 17 paintings came out, 8 or 9 sculptures, 2 interactive art pieces, all of which I'm going to create an installation around. And as I started posting things, 3 of the biggest art critics in the world were liking it along the way on Instagram. I said, wow, maybe I should have done this sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've got it tomorrow. It's tomorrow night, correct? Is the exhibit?
It's tomorrow night. So that's why I'm exhausted and I barely have a voice and I can hardly talk to you. You're like, this guy's sort of out of it, but I've been staying up till 3 or 4 a.m. painting. Sure. It's not just going into a gallery and putting artwork on the wall. This is huge abandoned building with 50-foot ceilings and huge exterior space with these weird concrete, looks like some sort of army barracks pillars where the coal would be poured into to push into this giant abandoned powerhouse I'm using. So I've had to clean and prep the space, figure out how to light it, get power there, get everything safe and organized on top of moving all the pieces in and painting them. And I tend to want to be up till 3, 4 a.m. painting because once I'm in the garage or the studio with the lights, no clock, I'll paint 5, 6 hours straight. And that's why I couldn't paint the last 18 years. How are you going to run if you're in this state that I'm in right now?
Correct. Yeah. No, that's
so you have to be very singular focused to be, whether you want to be an Olympian, successful painter, podcaster. I mean, you've got every range of, business background and dealings for your audience. And so I'd say that what the Olympian mindset is you're going to face these hurdles metaphorically. In my case, I chose them. Right. Secondarily, you're going to fall along the way and you're going to fail, which I did in 2004. Then I got back up and I found another way for 4 years through persistence and just pure discipline to get there again. Right. And another thing went wrong at the 2008 Olympics, which we maybe get into, but it was just this continual, single track minded persistence. I went from not so good high school runner to, decent college runner to great college runner at UT to not so great pro runner to beating the best and setting the fastest 5K ever on US soil, 13:11. I had no idea that was in me, but it took 10 years of patience to get there. Right.
That's a good point.
That kind of leads me into my next question. Me personally, I come from a strength and conditioning background. Talk about, some of the training that went into making you the runner you became, right? Whether it's in the weight room, on the track, maybe nutrition, just kind of that whole aspect of, what it took off the track, to make you an Olympian. From what you said, maybe not even that good of a high school runner and college runner.
Okay, so I'll really quickly. I'll go to high school. Like when I started running, I was so green to it. I think the first week of high school practice, I was walking down the stairs and my legs hurt so bad. I called the coach. I said, "What's wrong? Do I have to go to the hospital?" He said, "You're sore." I was like, "Is it a condition? I got to go to the hospital." He's like, "You're sore." I didn't know I was sore. I didn't even know what that was. And I remember when track started, 10th grade, which is the high school, they said, "We're going to do thousands." And I was like, thousands? Like what? 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 sit-ups? And they're like 1,000 meters. I was like, that sounds like a lot. 1,000. And it was just, 2.5 laps on the track. Why didn't you just say 2.5 laps? That was so green. Right. And so I had to catch up in terms of, overtime cardio and slow aerobic base. So once I got those years under me, I went to App State and was getting crushed by collegiate runners who were doing 70 miles a week, 80 in the summer, and I was doing 30. So I had to slowly catch up. And then when I finished and, after 2 years of doing well there, I said, okay, the SEC is the spot. Now I need to elevate to that level. And then I'd get there and you got the football players. Peyton Manning had just transitioned out of there when I came in. And my good friend on the team was to suite mate with him in the dorms. So he got to interact with them. So seeing those kind of guys and T. Martin, them in, Travis Henry in the weight room in Tennessee, and the intensity and the next level, and then Todd Williams, all these other guys who would turn pro. All of a sudden I went from winning workouts at App State to sitting in the shower. I had to go home after cross-country practice at Tennessee and sit down in the shower. Sometimes I'd fall asleep sitting down. I'd get up sometimes and I'd, put on a pot of boiling water and I'd pass out on the couch and have to wake up to the fire alarm, turn it off. And I wouldn't even eat. I was so tired. I'd go back to sleep and I'd wake up in time for 7 a.m. morning run, then start the process again. So I was just broken down to where I didn't think I could function to be built back up into this Olympic level athlete. But it's hard because most of us, when I was winning and going to dominate for 2 more years at App State and then get offered a full scholarship, who would leave and take a house scholarship somewhere else and want to get beat and start over? Right. But I wanted to always see how good I could be. Right. And I think part of that is the Bill Clendon and the middle school coach who was the gym teacher, who was assistant coach in 10th grade for cross country and track, and, taught my high school coach, as a mentor. He passed away in 10th grade at our like 5th or 6th cross country practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from that day, when the things he would say to me to like, I could be good and was encouraging. When someone who introduces you to the sport that you do, and, that situation happens where they pass away, you're like, well, this person identifies something in me I didn't know was there. I want to take it as far as I possibly can. So I don't think it ever was like a means to an end for me to get something or have a full scholarship or just make life easy. I was always wanting to see the very height of what I was made of. Got a lot more profound stories related to that with a near-death experience and other things that we'll save for another podcast. But it makes it easy to take risks,
right,
and front run and attack because you're not afraid to fail. And that's
right.
all I would sort of pass on, whether it's strength and conditioning, fencing. I mean, you see like a 17-year-old swimmer get an Olympic medal. I work here where there's a group called Swim Mac, and athletes that I coach in high school level who do Swim Mac are doing elite level, crazy discipline training by the time, they're early high school. So it's not a surprise to see those athletes do so well. So it's this like singular focus of intensity, this laser focus of wanting to reach that thing. And it doesn't matter what the event is. I mean, you could do skateboarding and ping pong at the Olympics now.
Sure.
You just have to be willing to work to that degree.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to kind of turn it over to Joseph. Joseph may have a couple other questions, and then we like to finish with what we call a rapid fire session. He'll explain that to you. But obviously, if my math is correct, you can't be much older than about 40 years old or so. So you're still a very young man. And you've achieved so much in the short time that you've been a young man from the time you were in college on. What's on the horizon for Anthony? I mean, what are some of the things that maybe you'd like to do that you haven't had a chance to do? Maybe pushing the boundary with your company, reckless running, maybe doing some more sculpture. What are some of the things that a man like you's got to have a goal sheet? So tell me some of the things you'd like to do moving forward.
There's some of them are really big goals that I've already attempted that would change the way things are done in the sport. And I'm still working on it. So I won't go into detail on some of those.
Sure.
They're financially pressing and stressing in terms of like, just big grand plans that we've had, especially for our business. So I'm always aiming for as far as I can aim, and it's been said by some psychologists where you see the star, you're aligned with where you want to go. You know what it is that you're meant to do. And that's either mentoring and running or giving back to the sport in that way.
Right.
Or, in some cases I help folks where we run and they'll come with all manner of issues. They're not coming to me to be a fast runner. They just want to learn to run to cope with life. A lot of kids with anxiety and things like that. I'm starting to see that running really is the best medicine. So in terms of a business, I'm not just trying to aim for financial success, but a way that we're giving back in the long term, because the way things are going on in the world and mass consumption and commodification of everything, things are going to, for the environment to be stable, we're going to have to quiet that down.
Right.
I had an asthma attack in Beijing in the 2008 Olympics, which I said, something happened in Beijing I wasn't expecting. I never had asthma before.
Right.
And so I was affected in Beijing. They really should not have had the games there. And now you've got folks protesting Beijing 2022
right.
for different humanitarian reasons. But the Olympics always ends up in these places where it's compromising for the athletes, but it's sort of trying to help the world either geopolitically or, economically with the way the nations work. So you have
right.
Rio, London, Beijing, and now Beijing again. And, like it was South Korea, even during when all the kind of craziness was going on.
Right.
So as an athlete, an Olympic athlete, seeing how these things really work, building out a brand and a plan for the future was always about how could I give back to that coach who gave to me to identify something that changed my life in terms of discipline, follow through, character. It's hard not to be content when you make 2 Olympic teams and you didn't think you were good enough to even run in college.
Right.
So it helps me because I've gotten that thing out of the way that I always wanted to do. And so it could be, difficult or really easy on the other side, because if you've done that thing, it's easy to be content and just sort of rely on what you did in the past. When in my case, I'm always trying to find more. So it frees me up to do things other people wouldn't try, like a sub 4-minute mile on the treadmill, which I did. Had like 4 million views on YouTube.
Right.
I just filmed myself for my 41st birthday trying to break sub 4, which is like, who does that? Well, I'm free to do that now.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
in terms of the art. Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go right ahead.
I know we're going to transition to Joseph's. I didn't want to get too wordy into
That's
it.
okay.
But the art was something I denied for 18 years and was writing down sculptures and ideas all that time. And one that I came up with in the basement of my home in Knoxville, I finally put to paper and made a digital artwork actually out of it. And the biggest critic in the world liked it. And now it's like, wow, just sitting on that for 18 years in a basement on a, crumpled piece of paper. So it helped me realize that there's, other aspects of me that could be heightened and taken as far as they can go. So part of putting on this solo show wasn't just, hey, let me get a couple photos or paintings in an exhibition. It's like, if you're going to do this, do it to the height, contribute to the art world, take risks, make things as far as you can go. So I'm aiming for trying to be the best artist I can be and still run to some degree, but like take it to the height. I'd like to contribute no different than some of the greatest names in art.
Awesome.
Well, I guess my last question before we get into rapid fire is to circle back to the Olympics. A lot of Olympians maybe have a chance to only experience one Olympics. You've been to two, so Athens and Beijing. Let's just compare and contrast your experience there, with both of those, maybe some differences. I'm sure the first one was probably a little bit more of a whirlwind, and then the second one you're able to kind of sit in and say, okay, I've been here before. Just kind of talk about the two experiences, the differences between, the two events, the two cities.
Yeah, I mean, the first Olympics, when you go and you walk in the opening ceremonies, I think you've had other athletes mention that, like, how life-changing that is. And it doesn't matter like how, pro-America or anti-America, whatever you are, when you walk in representing sort of the diversity of our country and you see it in the athletes that come in, in the different sports, it's such a proud moment because you realize like all the people in your country, what they've sacrificed for your country to have the freedoms that it does and be what it is. So a lot of that melts away, and you just feel like one unified thing. So I wish we had more of that as a country. And I wish somehow other people could experience that. There's a way that you could feel the chill bumps you get on the back of your neck walking in to represent at the Olympics. It's this heightened competition where the world is literally pushing each other to a higher level. Even the Dalai Lama said competition is good because, if it's done fairly and ethically or responsibly, you're actually making the people around you better. And so that's the whole point is as a global, group of human beings, we're trying to push to a higher state. And it makes me sad to see the Olympics sort of devolve into doping and what happened to cycling and controversy. When in reality, 99.9% of the athletes that are there are just so overjoyed. And for me too, to see friends who were, Kenyan born athletes become US citizens and now represent the United States in the steeplechase. It's amazing to see because you can see when they become a US citizen, the change in their thought process and how they work and race, where there's this sort of awesome pride, to have earned that. So it's, I think Athens was the first experience of that, but to do it where you're walking through the Olympic Village, you look down on the ground and you see these broken pots that have been there for thousands of years. And you realize that your Olympic Village is built over this huge, remnant of the cradle of democracy, and that all these ideas and freedoms that the United States has were born out of there. And it's the birthplace of Olympics, which isn't a coincidence. Those two things sort of dovetail the way athletics helps us work and function societally, universally, globally. For that to get messed up through doping and cheating and, the scandals that happened with Russia, it's sort of really disheartened me going into the 2008 Olympics because I assumed the guys I was going to race, I just had to assume they were going to be doping. So there's always this, excitement and joy of knowing you've made it to that level, but the disappointment to know that if you want a medal, it's going to be probably just out of reach. You'll get really close. I have a sculpture in my show where there's I don't know if you can still see me on Zoom, but I have this fake Tokyo 2020 Olympic gold medal. Looks super, super real. In art, they call it the ready-made. So this is going to be an interactive piece of my art show where you have to stick your hand through this hole in the wall, and if you grab it, you can have it, but it's just out of reach. It's like right there. You can almost get it, and the way the hole is designed, you can't wiggle your arm. You guys probably won't air this till after the installation, so I give you an idea of how the piece will work. You'll see a sign that says you can look through, and it's say if you grab it, you can have it. And obviously it's going to be out of reach, but I will quietly leave a stick in the corner where that hole is. And I want to see how long it takes for someone to use the stick to take it and cheat. How long it will take because it's human nature. It doesn't matter if it's Wall Street, someone's going to take shortcuts. It doesn't matter if it's real estate, whatever business people are in. But the Olympics is it's supposed to be the representative microcosm of how we should be in society. So when distance running and just, Olympic sport in general started to get tainted in the early 2000s with EPO and these other designer drugs, I knew it was a matter of time before society went in that direction where it was sort of by all means necessary in terms of, you look at how companies have functioned ethically and not ethically, and the way that people would just sort of say whatever they need to say to get what they need to get. And so that's why my installation of paintings were called Truth Decay, because I was always struggling with, if I just doped and used a small little vial of stuff, I'd be the best guy, because I was beating those guys before I knew they were cheating, because some of them admitted to me that they were cheating, especially international steeplechasers. I won't say what countries. And so I never wanted to be that guy. It was always about me seeing how good I could be on my own and really find out like how deep the well was. So to taint the well didn't make any sense to me, but I was always wrestling with knowing that the superstars and the people that we see who get the medals are a lot of them phony, and I think the reason that the sentiment is the way that it is right now for the Olympics has a lot to do with that, a lot to do with having to see so many cheaters get caught. You really don't believe the performances you see anymore. So how are you going to have that magical moment if you think it's artificial, if you know the secret behind the trick, right?
Right. It's about, like you said, maximizing your own potential naturally. I think that's very important.
Yeah. So going into Beijing, I worked really hard for 4 years to go back there, and didn't make any of the same mistakes. I front run the entire prelim, and I was ahead of the returning gold and silver medalists, and I looked amazing. I got to the press and I was talking. I had a massive tightness in my chest and chest pain. I thought I was having a heart attack, and they said it was an asthma attack. And I couldn't take therapeutic use exemption medication because I didn't have a TUE, because I didn't have asthma as a diagnosis. Sure. So the environment that I had no control over affected my running. So that's when I realized like how bad things were in terms of, global pollution. I think, in my opinion, global warming is one thing, wherever you want to go with that. Global pollution is undeniable.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, listen, before we let you go here, like I think Ralph said, I think he's left now, but we want to do a few rapid fire questions at the end, just to kind of some fun questions, quick answers to kind of get to know you a little better and have a little fun. You up for that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So first question, favorite pregame meal or pre-event meal for your track event?
Outback Steakhouse. I started eating a Victoria Cup filet, garlic mashed potatoes, and a Caesar salad. And if you have a go-to routine, it's good luck. So they had an Outback pretty much every town.
Very good. Very good. All right. If I were to look at your pre-race playlist, what artist would I find most often?
I used to listen to a lot of Jane's Addiction, but really, I was listening to these weird Tibetan meditating monks to put me in this sort of like super deep head state to want to run as hard as I possibly could.
That works really too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That works. All right. Favorite sport to follow other than track and field?
I like to watch skateboarding. I like to see those guys jump high and not necessarily fall, but the risk involved. Yeah. Actually, MMA too. MMA. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. If you had to go out and run or compete in extreme cold or extreme heat, which one would you choose?
Extreme heat, 100%.
That probably makes a lot. I got you. All right. Another Olympic sport you might like to try other than track and field.
Let's see. I always wanted to do archery, because when I was in the ice bath after a super hard race, I just see them just like pull the bow back and just like relax. It's like nothing to it. So much less effort.
Seems very relaxing.
Archery. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You prefer to compete during the daytime or night events?
Nighttime. I think Dr. Jack Daniels always said that human performance with the studies that he's done, 7 a.m., 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I think 7 and 11 p.m. 11 p.m. always had the highest level workouts. So I would a lot of times work out at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night in Central Park. And so that's my normal go time.
Awesome. Okay. So if you have to go for a run, do you prefer the outdoors or the treadmill?
Outdoors, 100%. Unless it's cold outside, because I'd rather run in the heat.
Of course. All right. Between your two Olympics, favorite athlete you've had the chance to meet at one of those Olympics?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I was never really a fan of sport to that degree, but it was, obviously meeting Kobe Bryant and LeBron James was amazing. Like you just know who they are, and Kobe was like super, super sweet, taking pictures with everyone. So it's just such a sad that tragedy happened to have, to have the fortunate, few seconds to meet and chat with him was pretty awesome.
Right. I agree. Okay. So last question. If someone says you made the Olympics team, you get to choose any city in the world where it's going to be at. What city you choose?
Ooh, man, that's a really good question. I think somewhere in the Midwest. We really did like Salt Lake City with that Winter Olympics. I think something like that. I think, why wouldn't we just go to the Navajo Nation and build out a beautiful place for everyone to live there and have like America Olympics? How freaking awesome would that be?
I think you'd have a pretty cool Olympic village in that setup.
Dude, that would be insane. You can make like, traditional style homes for that. I went all through Utah, Arizona, Navajo Nation for vacation this year, and just seeing the history of all that in the Pueblo Indians. It was just amazing, man. So yeah, that's my spot.
Okay. All right, good. Listen, Anthony, we appreciate you joining us. Like you said, I'm sure you have quite a bit more stories. We didn't even really get into some of your treadmill records and things like that. We may definitely have you back on in the future. Yeah,
sorry for being exhausted, man. I appreciate it.
It's all good. We appreciate it. And real quickly at the end, I don't know if you mentioned it. How can people get involved with your brand? Is there a website to go to learn more about it?
Yeah, thanks. Go to recklessrunning.com. You can find out about our apparel and our custom racing singlets. You can also find out about my coaching. I do coach nationally with online workouts and different coaching online. So yeah, you can reach out to us there and check out art_of_fam on Instagram to see my weird art and show support there too. Yeah.
Definitely do that. All right, man. Listen, we
appreciate it. If they want a commission of painting, same thing there. I paint and ship all over the U.S.
Yeah, that's something that I know that Nathan, our producer, big into the art as well. I'm sure you guys can talk about that more often too. So, we appreciate it and everything you've talked about, and it's been a great episode. We had fun.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.